All right. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Recruiter Podcast, the podcast where we share all the ins and outs of what it's like to be in the recruiting industry and the wild journey that it is for us that choose to partake in it. I am your host, Clark Willcox, the founder of the Digital Recruiter, also co-CEO of Digital Recruiter Talent Group. And today, I have the luxury of being joined by my co-CEO of the Digital Recruiter Talent Group and Managing Director, Lauren Demato. She has been an internal recruiter, an agency owner. She is a sales and recruiter extraordinaire, one of my favorite people, maybe the best recruiter that I've ever met, and a very good friend. Lauren, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Clark. I appreciate all the kind words.
Of course, they're well earned. They're well earned. So I am excited to have this. We talk all the time, so
Yes.
I'm a little scared maybe of recording the conversation, but I think we'll be all right. But I'm excited for the people in the community to kind of find out, learn about you, kind of why you made the crazy decision to kind of join forces with me and what we're doing Digital Recruiter. I'm excited kind of for people to hear that story. I think there's a lot to be learned from you. So we'll start with, how'd you get into recruiting?
Excellent question. Still trying to figure that out myself. How I explain it to folks is I have this very twisty, turny path in life that has brought me here. I actually started my career in clinical research. I recruited for clinical trials at two of the best institutions in the United States. And I loved it so much, but there was just something inside of me, and you know me well at this point, that I was a little bored, to say the least. I needed something a little bit more fast-paced. Such important work, but there was just something missing for me. So I got the startup itch and I jumped ship, and I spent some time at early stage startups from seed to Series B, helping grow and scale their teams. Was always a solo recruiter, just kind of getting handed anything we needed, whether it was customer service to a CTO. I just had to figure it out, even if I had no clue what it was. It just happened. I took my prior experience and applied it to the startup world, and made a career out of it.
It just happened. I feel like that's every person's entry into recruiting.
Yes.
That was definitely mine.
Yes.
It just happened.
Yes. You should get $1 every time somebody says that.
Right. I have many dollars. So there's a lot of places we're going to take this, but the first one, I think it's kind of fun. How many times did recruiters hit you up as an internal recruiter to work with you?
As an internal recruiter, I was getting messages, and this is dating back to 2016.
Yeah.
Weekly, if not more frequently, for a long stretch of time.
Were you allowed to work with agencies at any of the places you were?
Yes and no. We did have some agency partnerships for specific roles. I tended to outpace them, if that surprises
anyone. The rare internal recruiter that could outpace the agency. So
yes, I would save internal companies a lot of money.
That's right. It's always the bane of, now you're on the other side and you're looking for the ones that don't quite have it all figured out. What was? I know your goal wasn't to work with agencies and was to save money, but I guess what were some of like the best and maybe the worst pitches that you heard from agency recruiters?
I guess some of the best are really when they are speaking to you about a specialized role. I worked, my last company I was internal at was a very specific neuroscience company. And those were specific scientists and engineers that we were looking for. So if somebody came to us and said that they specialized or could speak that language, it always, perked our ears up. I think when you receive an outreach mail that is just so generic and you could just tell that every person on the internet is receiving that same message, those are very easy to pass up.
That's that is yet another, tip of the cap to, niching down and having a vertical and owning it, which is a little bit ironic because as an agency recruiter, you'd think you'd have that, but
No, I don't have
you
that
have
at
a
all.
delightful phrase for yourself as the chameleon of the search, right? So
Yes.
it's so interesting that that's how you recommend, right? But then you're just engineers, recruiters,
Yeah.
salespeople, I don't know,
Uh-huh.
IT, like you recruit it all. So,
Yeah.
like, have
Yeah.
you tried to ever niche? Did it kind of just happen because you were internal and you were just used to working on everything? Like,
Yeah.
how'd that kind of come to be? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, working internally as a solo recruiter, I didn't have a choice. Like it was my job to work on whatever was handed to me and
Yeah.
perform on it.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know any different.
Right.
Truly. I think you challenged me for quite some time to even try to find a niche, whether it was executive or revenue. And I always pushed back. I said, I just can't. I enjoy doing it all. Like you said, while it's wild that I recommend folks to find their niche. I think just my upbringing, I have a good story and a background. And when I talk about, all the different types of companies and the high growth companies that I've worked with or at, and the variety of roles, and I can really speak to it, it's believable.
Yep. And I think that's where I've evolved. Working with someone like you and a couple other recruiters that come to mind. What I always say is lean into your strengths. And like that, I've had to kind of evolve my thinking over the last couple of years of sometimes that's not a specific vertical. That is
Mhm.
your background where you had to see every department, you had to place in every department people, and it was critical. Like that is your strength, right? Now, some people they come from they're a physical therapist and now they recruit physical therapists. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? They're not
Mhm.
looking to be, a million different things, or they come in from accounting, so they're going to place accounting and finance folks, and
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense in terms of subject matter expertise. It just happens to be that your
Yep.
subject matter expertise is really with like high growth companies, and
Mhm.
those roles can be across the board. Right?
Yep.
And I think that is kind of the common theme now with what the roles that we have on our board is. Their companies all kind of looking to grow, right? Whether it's recruiters looking for sales, looking for engineers, like you've kind of brought that like piece to like for us working together, and it makes sense because as a consultant and coach, companies and recruiting companies coming to me looking to grow, and I think that might make starting to kind of make some sense as to kind of
Yeah.
why we're like let's just team up on this
Yeah.
and make it happen. Uh,
Yeah.
Before we get there, how'd you make the switch from internal to agency owner?
I always say it just serendipitously happened. So, towards the end of 2020, the company I was at was just not making it out of the pandemic the way that we were hoping to, which was, so heartbreaking and unfortunate. At that same time, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I was about to have my second child. Life just looked different than it did, a few years ago. At that same time, I was at this crossroads. A lot of my old connections in this startup world started reaching out. VC firms that I had strong partnerships with, old colleagues, old CEOs that I've worked with, just kind of started handing me a role and asking if I had any capacity to help. And it snowballed very, very quickly. I think we received our first role. Late 2020. By January, I had my first employee working with me, and we just kept getting rec after rec after rec, and it was not intentional, truly. It happened, what felt like overnight.
That's amazing. I mean, right in the just getting right into the game, and yeah, 2021, 2022 was like a huge boom for the
Mhm.
agency recruiting world and just kind of
Yeah.
hiring in general. It's a lot has obviously changed this year.
Mhm.
It's definitely been a little bit more difficult, but I guess talk to us in kind of the beginning, right? How was it different? Going internal to agency, what were some of the challenges in maybe you got the roles and maybe making the placements, working the process on the
Mhm.
outside end versus being on the inside?
Yeah. No, I have never worked a day in my life in an agency. I no clue. I actually never wanted to. I thought it was just not my speed. It was not my type of environment. I am a let's all accomplish this together as opposed to going head to head with somebody. I'm a very competitive person, but not when it comes when it doesn't feel right. And it just that environment never felt right to me. And that's kind of how I built my previous agency off of. We are going to accomplish this together. We're going to work on this together. When we get a win, we all win because the client's going to be happy and we're just going to get more, which is exactly what happened. I had clients on retainers for 18 plus months because they were so satisfied with our work and our process. And I kind of, and I built my agency how I wanted it to. It did not look like any other agency you've probably ever come across because I didn't have that agency experience. So um, I, yeah.
It's and to I know you're going to be humble and modest and all those things, but it's an important point I try to tell everyone I work with, like, again, what are your strengths? What do you want to be? You get to determine this, right? With
Hmm.
a LinkedIn profile and everything else, like, you don't have to follow the standard. I mean, the recruiting fundamentals are always going to be like standard, right? But in terms of
Hmm.
like the identity and your kind of value prop, like, you get to dictate that. Like, that's the beautiful part of like LinkedIn and the internet and the ability to reach so many people ever
Hmm.
having to make like that one call, call after call after call. Like, you gotta be like, hey, this is who we're gonna be, this is who we want to work with, and the problems that we solved, and you got to get that message out, right? You got it out to your immediate network and built the foundation there and been able to start then really expanding on
Hmm.
that and kind of taking, I know you guys are sourcing up until 10, 11. You're screening constantly. I mean, you're getting after it with that
Yeah.
speed and that
Yeah.
quality. And then I think it kind of like you were just rocking and rolling. And then
Yeah.
it turned into like, all right, well, how do we like get this out there?
Hmm.
Right. And I guess kind of maybe talk to us about like what that looked like, kind of when you hit that mark and kind of you're like, all right, how do I build on this?
Yeah. Yeah, that was always something that I had, internally struggled with is we had this amazing group of clients. We had so much success, but I always knew that there was just a little bit more that I could do, a little bit more that we could capitalize on. And that's kind of how you came into the picture was earlier this year. Um, you just showed up on my feed, I think. Someone must have liked something and the
Yeah.
algorithms worked. The universe was trying to tell us something. And it just really spoke to me because we did not have to I never posted on LinkedIn. I never said a word. I was basically invisible because we were so busy and I just never had to put our services and everything that we've accomplished out there. And what I saw from your page and what you kind of helped teach agencies really spoke to me and kind of building more of a presence, building more of a brand and um, that's really I knew all along that we needed it. I just didn't know how to get there.
Right. And how to get there without spending like kind of spinning your wheels, taking you away from what's already driving revenue, right?
Hmm.
Like, what's like I think the intelligent way to go about it, and then you can kind of just run with it. 'Cause I think
Hmm.
that was what was. I've said it to you since January. Like, you came right in after like the first call, like your team. You're like, oh, we got to set up this system and get more out of like all our tools here. And then we got
Yeah.
to post here, and then next thing I knew, like, you were off and running, like the whole
Yeah.
team, like within a day or two. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd be
Well, I think
implemented as quickly as possible. Yeah.
I think I told you when I make an investment, I'm going to make sure I capitalize on it.
Yeah.
So I probably drove you crazy because I was like, okay, I finished my homework. What's next? And you're like, you're ahead. Let's let's review. But that's just kind of how I operate at full speed.
Well, it was great. I mean, I love it because it's the quicker you implement, the quicker you can figure stuff out, the quicker you can get results. I mean,
Yeah.
what was it like for you when you started posting content? Like, what was that experience like? Like, what resulted?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely uncomfortable
Yeah.
because I'm the type of person who even posts on Instagram 4 times a year on my kids' birthdays, my anniversary, and like maybe one family vacation.
Yeah.
So putting, you know, raw like rawness out into the universe was uncomfortable at first, for sure. I'm not somebody who likes to brag, who, divulges a lot of personal information. I don't document my day on social media. That's just not who I am. But I think after, a few goes typing content, it just became second nature.
Yeah. And it's really not that, like, it's one of my favorite examples because it's the exact type of person I believe should be posting content. Is you put your head down, you got the work, you had the results for your clients, and you've learned, like, you've gotten the reps, right? You've been through the fire, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot that people need. This hiring processes are broken everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're really attacking it, trying to, like, just what you said, the way you're building your company and everyone's winning it. You guys want to win, but win together and
Mm-hmm.
had that abundance mindset. And I think that was really, it seemed like it was really resonating with your clients, right? 18-month
Mm-hmm.
retainers, which is kind of
Yeah.
unheard of, right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, the way I look at it is it's almost like you have, not say like a responsibility, but like I'm encouraging you, like, get that out there because people need to know that exists. And there's
Yeah.
companies and people that are really struggling and maybe have had really bad experiences. And I was like, you don't even have to brag. Like, you just have to share what you're doing and what you're
Right.
working on. And that alone is going to be a revelation and you're going to bring people in, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like, hey, look how good we are. It's like, hey, we're solving these problems. We're excited about solving these problems. Like, are you facing this? Because that could
Right.
be enough for people just right there. Like, and that's why I try to tell people, like, it's not necessarily about, you just kind of show, it's what a teacher always told me, right? Show your work. Now,
Right.
I never liked showing my work. I just wanted my dad to give me the answer so I could turn in my homework and go play video games. But, like, that is what I tell people. It's like, just kind of just show your work and that is
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And I think what was so, I don't want to say funny, but the amount of people that were coming to me or texting me, messaging me on LinkedIn that were just in my personal network, not my work network, not folks that I had done anything, like people I go on vacations with.
yeah.
Um, like that, like my inner circle were like reaching out and like, I had no idea. Like I knew that you were badass, but I didn't know how badass you were. And I was
Yeah.
like, I know, I just do my work and then go on my merry way.
Yeah,
So,
that's just it's born, born like this, no big deal. And it's another great point though, because not only just the existing client and potential candidate network, but just the personal network, right? You like it's a way to kind of capture the potential low hanging fruit that you don't even
yeah,
know it's there. And if you could
absolutely.
just overcome the just like, what are people going to think? Who cares? I
Yeah,
mean, especially once you get out of your 20s, like, really, who cares? Right?
yeah,
Even in your 20s, no one cares.
yeah,
Right? It's just like you just kind of show your work and just take advantage of it, right?
yeah,
People just that's everyone's on their phone, right? I went to I flew to Atlanta last weekend. I mean, everyone at line is just head down on their phone, right? There's
hmm,
just everyone's looking, and they're on LinkedIn, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, like they're scrolling and they're looking to be entertained, and
yeah,
it just works, right? If they see your name, they're like, oh, like, I didn't know you do that, right? They click on your profile, they see what you're about, and I think
yeah,
you had people be like, oh, I need a CFO now or a CTO. Like, can you
exactly.
help me? I
Yep,
mean, okay, sure. Like, that's a huge
yep,
fee from just posting whatever you were working on, right? And we worked
yep,
on that to, like, hey, here's how to kind of balance that line so you don't feel like awkward or braggy, but you're also kind of getting what you do well out there. That's what
yeah,
we worked on. And then
absolutely.
it's what, one post, you go about the rest of your day, and boom, you get another search in your inbox. It's like,
Yep,
that's how simple it can be at
yep,
times, right?
absolutely.
I love it. Um, Craziest story from recruiting so far.
I don't think it's like one crazy story,
More memorable.
but I think it's more like people never cease to amaze me. Like
Yeah.
it's just you kind of forget how, you know, unique people are and how folks will get to the finish line and tell you that that's not what they told you they wanted compensation wise, even though you wrote down verbatim exactly what they said.
Yeah.
It's actually I've tried to desensitize myself to that stuff because people are just
People.
interesting. Yeah.
People will
People
people.
are people.
People are people.
So it's definitely not some wild story where, somebody showed up drunk or anything. Well, actually, I think we had one of those.
I think we did have one of those. Yeah.
I think it's just wild how folks will kind of change their tune even after, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 interviews and say, that's not what I agreed to, or that's not what I thought. Because, one of my pillars, and I kind of sound like a broken record if you've ever talked to me, but I will never give you somebody who does not agree to the compensation. If they do not agree to the compensation, I will tell you maybe they're 5 over, they're 10 over, or I will let you make the decision. And then sometimes you still get to the end of the road and it totally can fall apart sometimes, and it will drive you crazy because you spend so much time trying to avoid that. And people will come up with stories and try to tell you that's not what they said. But I'm very meticulous when it comes to that, because I think it's every recruiter's worst nightmare to get to the finish line to have it fall apart. So
Well, especially when it's compensation, and I think it shows like it's almost like the worst in a
the
sense,
worst.
because the client's looking at you like, what are we doing here? I mean, this is rookie level type stuff.
Mhm.
Like, you
Yeah.
can't figure out the compensation. Are you afraid to ask? Like, you let them lie to you. Like, your
Yeah.
job is to figure out and filter the candidate and the client. So it's like a
Hmm.
huge gap, right?
Yep.
When that happens. I mean, it's painful, and I think everyone learns it probably the hard
Yep.
way in recruiting.
Yep.
I know I definitely did. Uh,
Yeah.
what?
And
Oh, yeah.
it
Go ahead.
happens. It just happens,
Yeah.
as much as you try to avoid it, or someone says, now I think one of the hot uh, points during an interview is asking if they're agreeable to going back into an office.
Yeah.
How many days and, to what extent, and making sure they're agreeable to that almost just as much as compensation. We're starting to see a lot more folks requiring in office presence, even 5 days a week. So making sure they're agreeable to that is important too.
Right, and how that it's going to affect their commute, their schedule, right? Some people got comfortable with it. It might be a daycare thing or
Mhm.
whatever else, right? And it's just having the uncomfortable conversations on the
Yeah.
front end with comp and all that. I mean, it's easy to get excited about a
Mhm.
candidate, a perfect LinkedIn profile, the perfect resume. It's like, oh, I found the needle in the haystack, all right, or the purple unicorn, as people call it. And it's like you can kind of skip steps if you're not careful, and that kind of
Mhm.
completely butcher the relationship with the partnership with the client, and oh, they have
Mhm.
10, 15 more roles if you just figure out this one. But we kind of get
Yeah.
so excited we could skip steps. You you do a really good job of balancing speed but also the quality of the filtering. Like, how are you able to strike that balance, or like what do you kind of see that works for you, kind of be able to kind of have that speed and that turnaround time but without like sacrificing the quality of the screen?
Yeah. Um, I dedicate a lot of time. I'm a bit of a workhorse, I will say. Sourcing is something I actually enjoy. I'm a puzzle person, so this is kind of another variation of a puzzle, trying to find the right pieces for the perfect candidate and get that over. And again, I think working with startups, early stage companies, I have a really deep understanding of the landscape of, fintech companies, ed tech, environmental tech, who were the big wigs and like where to go after, and utilizing internet tools to make sure you're doing research and not just kind of spinning your wheels and sending messages to the first, 100 people you see. And I don't turn off. I don't know what to
Yeah, you
say.
really
There's no
don't. You really
secret
don't. Yeah, it's like it's
sauce.
just always going Energizer Bunny. It's just recruit
Yeah.
source, source screen, source screen,
Source
source
screen,
screen,
source
play
screen.
sales, sales calls. Yeah,
Yeah.
the back
We've
and forth. Yeah,
you've heard us say a few times over the past few days that, viewing every candidate call as the one, the
yeah,
the placement fee, the one
yeah.
that's going to get you the the payday that you're looking for. So, really making sure that the people we're putting on our calendars are what we're looking for as much as we can see based off of their profile. So really not wasting time, not talking to, 100 people a week and maybe one of them is the right one. If I have a day of, you know, 6 to 8 phone screens, and if I'm not submitting half, I'm mad at myself because I didn't do the right job.
It's important, right? I work with a lot of agencies, a lot of recruiters, and we talked about this. I talked about this with your team at the time, and the spring and winter was like filter through the inbox, right? Like let some of the systems and automations do their thing,
Yep.
but filter through the inbox. Don't just get excited and start talking to 50 people in a week and only
Right.
8 of them are relevant. Like now's your chance. You can like weed through people even quicker and weed through people in terms of like just timing, right? Not everyone is looking and not everyone is a fit, but it's also like you don't want to waste their time. And people really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that when you're using the tools and the systems to really vet people. And vetting, it's not just for you, it's for them too. It's like, great, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to spend 30 minutes talking to a recruiter when there's
Yeah.
nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? In the market, especially engineers and sales, like they're caught up on all this and they're getting hit up all the time. So that
Yeah.
efficiency, people are really appreciating like that upfrontness, that transparency, that efficiency. I know
Absolutely.
like salary transparency is like the big deal, but it's way more than just that,
Right.
right? It's
Well,
just like
even
the easy one to talk about.
right. Well, we've even started just sending job descriptions to candidates to making sure that they're aligned with the requirements or the tech stack if it's an engineer. And a lot of folks will say, that's not for me, or I don't want to work in that industry, or this is exactly what I'm looking for. And it saves everyone time. I think some recruiters are nervous about giving away too much of a client and the person's just going to go and apply. Like, they're not going to get seen the way that we can have them get seen.
Yeah.
So, like getting their notes in, getting their resume in, if you're just throwing your resume into another stack, you're not going to get seen as quickly as going through us. So I don't have any concerns in that area.
Yeah. And you can always remove the company logo or something like company
Yeah.
name if you need
Yes.
to, when they
Yeah.
can get, do all that.
Yep.
But setting a job description requires qualifying clients, qualifying a
Mm-hmm.
good role, feeling good
Mm-hmm.
about the job description, not relying on just HR. So, how talk to us about that? Because I know, I mean, well, I am definitely a broken record talking about that. I think that people want to hear from someone else for
Yeah.
once, but talk to us about your process there, what goes into that, how you're qualifying good and
Yeah.
not so good clients.
Yeah. So the best client I'm going to get a qualified rec out of is getting on a video call with them, making that connection, looking into their eyes, making sure that they're committed. I think if you're getting on a video call with me, you need this. You're committed. If
Yeah.
it's a phone call and you're kind of doing it while you're driving, it's like, how badly do you need this role? You're not giving me the time and attention that this needs and how serious you are. So step one is just getting that link out, getting them on the camera, and really going through, their needs. I usually ask them to, give me the elevator pitch of the company. I recently had a client that couldn't really even elevator pitch their own services, which was a bit of a red flag.
Interesting.
Uh, but asking that, I'm trying to go through, I have a mental checklist that I go through where I say, tell me, your ideal client. What are the must-haves, the non-negotiables? What is something that's not on the resume that you want to see, whether that's someone's characteristics or like the intangibles. And on the flip side, what don't you want to see? What companies don't you want to see? What companies do you want to see? Tell me about the interview process. Sometimes, the best clients are going to know what that interview process looks like. You don't want to get started, hand someone off, and then they're trying to figure out who's going to talk to them first. I have a very consultative process. So, if someone doesn't know, I'll kind of walk them through and help them think it through and give them some options. Assessing compensation, making sure it's very clear and laid out. If someone says, I don't know, let's see what the market tells us, I'll push back a little bit because I've played that game before and it sounds great. You think you might have an uncapped, salary band, and then you bring them someone and it's actually not uncapped and they actually do have an idea. So trying to push back on that. Going over benefits, those are really important to candidates, especially these days. How long the job has been open, if
Oh yeah.
it's just opened, has it been open for a while? If it's been open for a while, kind of understanding why, helping unpack that. And being transparent with the client. If it's been open for a while and they've had multiple recruiters working on it and they haven't gotten anything, like really trying to understand, okay, let's go back. Is it the compensation? Like, what have you seen? Again, like a very consultative approach. Very rarely will I accept a JD from a client without that call. You have to earn my trust
Yeah.
in order to do that. I have to have a really, really good understanding and working relationship with the company to forego some of those pieces.
It's we're not here to be guinea pigs, right? And I
Mm-mm.
think everyone listening or watching is starting to understand why I wanted to really, why I wanted to work with Lauren is it's all the principles that I talk about all the time. And it's just like you have to have like your standard, and you have to have the trust. Like they have to earn your trust, and
Mm-hmm.
not the other way around. And I hear too
Mm-hmm.
many recruiters and agency owners that are, why am I getting stuck? Because you're not making them earn it. Like they have to.
Right.
At the end of the day, this person is going to work for their company, not
Right.
yours. So it's like they got to want it, right? They got to be able to make the elevator pitch. They got to know the process. Like, do you guys like want this or do you not? Because if they don't, you can never want it more than they want it. Like that's
Right.
a recipe for disaster and to
Yeah.
work for free and be a guinea pig and all those terrible things that we're trying to avoid, right? As
Yeah.
agency recruiters.
Yeah, I think 9 times out of 10, if a client is just sending you a job description and you're not holding that kickoff call, you sh- you might as well just throw it in the trash
Yeah.
along with whatever time you're going to spend on it, because it's not vetted on your side or probably their side. There's probably a lot of things that they didn't think through by
Yeah.
having, a recruiter or somebody on our side kind of poke the holes in and challenge them or question them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's okay to have an out to tell them like, hey, you guys aren't quite ready. That's okay. Like
Yeah.
we only work on stuff that's going to close within 2 weeks. So like, let's talk in 2 months, 3 months. Like we'll put
Mhm.
something on the calendar, right?
Yep.
And kind of like just doing that, giving them the out. Sometimes they're like, actually, no, 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 we need it quicker. Okay, well, let's like
Mhm.
actually figure it out. And they're like, oh, okay, that works. Like,
Mhm.
they're maybe not expecting to hear that from a recruiter because they're used to
Right.
agencies and recruiters just chasing a wishful wreck in a sense.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like if you can change their experience or kind of what they're used to hearing too, it's a great way to get buy-in in the short term, but especially maybe even in the long term, right? They're like, hey, yeah, you
Yeah.
know what, you were right. Like now we're ready to take it seriously. It's like, okay, great. Like let's have the conversation again. But then you haven't
Yeah.
wasted hours and hours of your time.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Exactly.
so on the flip side, you get a good client, you get a great
Mhm.
role, you're excited, you have a kickoff, sales call, sign agreement, intake call. Talk to us like what's that next week look like how are you setting expectations, what are your expectations, what are you
Yeah.
telling the client, like that's a critical part of the process. I don't think it's talked about enough, uh,
Yeah.
but I love your approach here, so I want the people to hear it.
So I wrap every client kickoff call with, from here, we start our process. Once the contract is signed,
Yeah.
we get sourcing and we move fast. So I like to under promise, over deliver, and I always get that messed up. So I usually tell folks that we'll have vetted, screened candidates within a week. It's more like 3 business days, if I'm being honest with myself. We immediately start sourcing. I think the second we get a good rec, our hands are burning and we can't wait to get out there and, freshly source the role. And we try to screen as quickly as possible and get folks on the phone as quickly as possible, because time is of the essence, not only from the client side, but on the candidate side. Candidates are actively interviewing. Folks are in the process with other places already. So it's imperative that we're getting them over to the client as quickly as possible. So we screen. I tell clients, we'll follow whatever process you'd like when it comes to collecting information. So if you have a list of questions you want us to ask on your behalf, please send that to us. We rather ask all the questions and save you all the time than just write what we think is important, which, we try to check all the big boxes that are necessary for the job description, make sure that they're agreeable to compensation and anything else that's required for the role. And then we share that with the client and they tell us if they'd like to meet with them. And if I do not have candidates to a client within 3 to 5 business days, they're going to hear from me as to why. Is it because we're not getting any response? Is it because the comp's off? Is it because there's an in-office component? Like, what is it? Because if I say I'm going to work on it, I am working on it. And I'm not one of those recruiters that takes a rec and you don't hear from me again when the going gets hard.
That's how you're supposed to draw it up. That's how I love the update because it shows, number one, it shows so many things I think recruiters can miss out on a lot of the times. It's just that speed, right? You're following through on your promises and you're giving, like, your job is to give the lay of the land when you're sourcing and screening, right? As we talk about, so it's on your, the profile and like the value prop is like, we're going to like have ears to the ground. We're going to figure out what's going on. And here's what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. Like the better you qualify the role and kind of set the expectations, you can give that feedback and they're just like, okay, they know what to do. Either they got great candidates are ready to go or we got to repivot. But at least like it's quick, right? You can move on quickly if it's not going to work. You can like dive in deeper if it is going to work. And then it's like off to the next one, right? Off your plate, onto the next one. Because once the submittals are through, to me, that's just like, okay, that's off my plate. Now you got to navigate logistics, but it's a lot less time than the sourcing and the screening. And that's like, I think that's what you do. You and Megan do amazingly well. It's like you just dive in, you take care of it, you get it off your desk, and then on to the next one, and just repeat that process versus getting stuck. And you're only able to do that because of those front end conversations, right?
Yeah.
Being meticulous about that and just being honest and direct and transparent. And like that's what opens up the doors and not being afraid to have a follow up. And as you said, under promise. If you don't over promise, then it's a lot easier to do that check in day 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And going back to one thing, so being the pulse on the market is something that I've always kind of taken pride in. Anytime we have a role and you start to see the pattern of like the comps not matching up or whatnot, we track everything. I will log the profile, how much they're looking for, or the reasons why they're screening out, because you cannot go back to a client and kind of say, here's what's going on, or, this is why no one's making their way through without the data. So the data is just so important. Otherwise, if you go back to them and say, like, it's not working and people want more money, they're going to ask, well, how much more? And if you're not tracking that and presenting that to them in a very thoughtful way, it's going to kind of all be for nothing.
Right. Track your notes, track the conversation. That's why you want to push back on candidates, get a clear read on it, right? And have that. And versus just having conversations, not really tracking it. And then once it becomes like too subjective and like just by conversations and the he said, she said, that's when clients are kind of like, I don't know how thorough this recruiter is. And if I want to give them a $20,000 fee, we're probably better off to try to figure it out on our own. And recruiters are losing business without even knowing it just because they're not doing basic note tracking. And whether you document it in the notes or Google Sheets or an ATS system, it doesn't matter. But you got to track it and you got to be alert. Every conversation, as you said, could be 10, 20, 30, $50,000 placement. Like who knows? Right. And that could be the placement that leads to way more business. Right. So like just being intentional every step of the way is so critical, and just like understanding that, kind of having that like seriousness about it, right? Or that being intentional about it. Like that's like, it's critical. And I mean, sometimes it can be so easy to get into recruiting or call yourself a recruiter. People don't understand, like, you got to take this like seriously, not too seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously, but you got to take your work seriously. At the same time, in the quality of the work, and that like real money is moving across. And sometimes people forget that, right? Like, oh, this client's not giving me this or this candidate. It's like, well, what are you doing to earn that, right? Like, you got to like show up and like make it happen, look like you're
Yeah.
legit, it's serious, and like someone that they should want to work with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that was one thing, you know, when I had my own agency, even now, it's so important to me to have um, a good brand, a good personal brand, a good company brand that I'm pleasant to work with, that I'm responsive, that I can work quickly, that I'm helpful. Like those were all things that, since day one, without the intention of building a company, that I just wanted to be as a person,
Yep.
that I think has made all the difference in building long-term client relationships. Yeah.
I agree. So for the recruiters or some people that are listening,
Hmm.
that I'd be like, but Lauren, some roles, it's a purple unicorn. It's going to take me weeks to find people. It's not realistic. I can't find an engineer in 2 to 3 days in this market, et cetera, et cetera. What do you say to
Did you try? I don't
that? Yes.
know.
Yes.
No, I think there's absolutely some roles that are difficult without a question. I'll use the example. We had a role earlier this summer in environmental tech, a very, very specific engineering role with a specific location, very specific comp budget. And it was hard, no questions asked. And those there's someone out there for every job. It just might take a little longer. And I think as long as you are communicating what you are finding, what you are seeing, and if you stay committed, we have a role right now that Megan and I are going to go to the ends of the earth to find them
Yep.
because we are committed. And I don't know if any other recruiters are committed to that. I think a lot
Sure.
of recruiters want the easy layups, the one and dones. They are, close it and move on to the next one. But for us, it's more about the relationship, the partnership. Like we're not giving up on you. This is a real wreck. Like it's not because it's a bad job. It's just, a very niche role in a small market. And that person will present themselves in due time and that payout will be so worth it.
Yeah.
So I just say, if you want it, just don't give up and keep
Yeah.
looking and, let it sit for a day. Let your mind relax on it. Sometimes when you work something too hard, you kind of get in the way of yourself. But go back to it because if it's a good rec with a company that is legit, it's going to get filled whether you place it or someone else does.
Well, that's what you said. If the client is there and the client's committed and it's urgent and is on the same page with you, and the word that comes back over and over again, right? The communication, right? The lines of communication are open and they're clear,
Hmm.
right? It can take a little bit of an effort, right?
Yeah.
And so you have that. You also have some of your bread and butter stuff that you want, like always running in the background, right? It's not like an either or; it's an and
Yeah.
that's there's always time in the day, right?
Yeah.
Typically, when I look into KPIs and recruiter activity, I'm like, all right, you set up an outreach campaign, you had a couple messages, like, what did you do the rest of the day? Right. And
Hmm.
when my manager caught this on, early in my recruiting days, she's like, all right, talked to 4 people, you got a couple subs out, like, what's next? Like,
Yeah.
you got half the day left. Like, what are you doing the
Yeah.
rest of the day? It's like, I don't know, I guess I'll make some calls, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can always be doing something
Right.
in recruiting, and I think just that self reflection, being honest with yourself of like, am I giving this everything I got? Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, most of us have it's recruiting is not rocket science. It is a people science. It is all about logistics, but it is also
Hmm.
getting as many quality irons in the fire as
Yeah.
possible. And I kind of hear people making excuses and all that. Typically, like you look under the hood, it's like, look, you could be working at this a lot harder, probably a
Hmm.
little bit smarter, right? Like a little bit of
Yeah.
creative thinking, and that's like what it's going to do to sometimes earn that commission. And you're going to feel better about yourself and your work if you put in that effort. And
Right.
typically, right, you get rewarded for those types of behaviors, even if
Yep.
it's not overnight. Like,
Yeah.
it's all a lead lag effect, right? And that's
Yeah.
the way to stand out from all the other recruiters that aren't doing those things.
Yep.
So,
Exactly. Exactly.
so what everyone wants to know, why are we now? You went from a client, now we're working together. How'd that all happen? Why did it happen?
I think, early on, I kind of viewed you as, not just someone who was teaching us how to put content out there, how to build Dripify campaigns. But as a business coach, like we had a lot of great conversations about how to take certain things to the next level and, monetize recruiting in different ways and in different avenues. And I think there were just a lot of great synergies when we would have just very off the cuff discussions about, there could be something more than just filling recs and trying to find recs and, building, a new and different machine to um, be an additive to the community that you've spent so much time building over the past few years. And I think our conversation lasted like 5 minutes when we decided to
Yeah,
just go for it.
yeah.
Things were in a transition period for me and my agency, and it just felt like the right and comfortable next step.
It was crazy because I think my son, so my first child, was about a week old. I took a week. I lasted about a week not working. Now it took me a few weeks to actually my brain to not be mush. But the first conversation I had, I remember it was a week after he was born. It was on a Wednesday. The it was talking to you, right?
Yeah.
And you were going through something, and I kind of heard it out. I was like, well, why don't you just come over here? Like, we'll just knock this out. Like, I got a network. I mean, I was always kind of had my eye out. I'm like, there's a recruiter out there that understands the sales, understands the recruiting, that could like I could team, bring in, team up with, and kind of have as like the managing director run the day to day, and I'll kind of do all the branding and the marketing and make some
Mhm.
introductions and partnerships that can kind of run with it. I was like,
Mhm.
I had to be patient for it, and like it just worked out, and
Mhm.
I was like, well, this could be perfect, and I think that's
Mhm.
what's happened. I mean, just you are all those things that you said, right? The responsiveness, I joke like I'll be on a 30-minute call and I come back and I got 5 emails from Lauren responding to every different thing. I'm like, this is amazing. Like I hate emails, right? So it's just like kind of that partnership. But I was like, I like coming up with content ideas and like the longer term vision and kind of how to implement some of the stuff and how to navigate some of those tough conversations around the sales. Like
Mhm.
I love stuff like that, but it is a lot building an
Yeah.
agency and scaling an agency. There's no way I was ever going to do it on my own. People are like, why don't you build it yourself? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I love the training and the coach and like the sales piece, but like the day to day managing the recruiters and doing the recruiting, like that's not my sweet spot. To be honest,
Right.
like I can do it. I've done it, but it's like those are my strengths, right? And I mean,
Mhm.
the fact that you bring that to the table, it just kind of made sense. And I think the lesson is just like if you put yourself out there, you work with people. I said you do good. You treat people the right way. You work hard for them, right? You come through in your
Mhm.
promises. Like you don't know what opportunities could come up, and you might view things like one way. They might develop into this like other thing, right?
Mhm.
And not being such like a stickler of like, well, I got to do it this way, or they were a client. I don't know if I could partner. It's like, how
Yeah.
does this thing like? There's always so much out there, but there's only so much time in the day. It's just
Mhm.
like, who like how can we kind of partner and have fun and who like it's kind of on the same level like work wise. And I think that's also been kind of fun. It's like you're like, well, I'm a little intense. I'm always sourcing and on calls and we talk all the time. I'm like, I'm the same way with like me and Christina and Ross. I think we annoyed to no end probably. But it's just like we're always online, it seems like. But yet also I'll still spend time with our families somehow. So I
Yeah.
don't quite know how we all do it. But like, I think
So.
we're all like on that level, like that playing field. Like that's
Mhm.
what's making this work. And I
Yeah.
think making this a lot of fun. It's like we like get at it and then it's like, all right, dinner, all right, fireworks, all right, I gotta go here. Right. So I was like, okay, cool, like no problem. Like, and like there's like that healthy is maybe we're just all crazy. That's what it like.
Yeah.
It's all the same level of nuts. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what it is. But it's super fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to kind of think of different, you know, products and platforms that you can add into the digital recruiter world
Yeah.
that will continue to enhance and service and hopefully, not just us, but many other recruiters will find valuable to their agency, or if they're solopreneurs that need, more support, you're certainly building those, outlets to make it happen for everyone.
Yeah, it's what's fun, right? Kind of building that little community, and it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely added so much. I think it's like showing people, kind of setting the standard of, this is what digital recruiter is kind of all about. Like, we work hard, we have a good time, like we do what needs to get done, kind of pushing some of the innovation, and really kind of all like working together, kind of setting a standard, like really not making excuses, but like getting
Right.
things done. And so to that end, talk about innovations. We've decided to launch about 3 weeks ago the digital recruiter split rec board,
Mm-hmm.
where the idea is there was an overflow, right? Members in our community, hey, I got more roles than I know what to do with, and I can't work on all of them. And there's recruiters that's like, hey, we got a little bit of a lull, or we got some clients who are like, maybe 3 weeks out, we got stuff to, we want stuff to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to make some of those matches.
Mm-hmm.
I get talk to us about kind of the split rec board. Yeah, like what your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, how that's kind of
Yeah.
like playing out. Yeah.
Yeah. Our my third child, the split rec board,
Yeah.
is something that was just very apparent that your community needed once we started working together. Um, you have some folks that are overwhelmed and they have so many recs, and they, it's just better to split them with somebody else than to let them go and sit unfilled because you can't provide the necessary, attention to them. You don't want to let them go, or clients who are, want a client, or your clients that want a client, and they get a rec that just might not be in their wheelhouse, but they want to nurture that relationship. It's an outlet for that. So it's basically, a recruiting dating system. There's an application on both ends where, rec holders can submit their qualified rec.
Qualified Rex
Qualified,
key.
as described before, for us to review and to further help qualify. And then there is I call it the fulfillment side, where fulfillment recruiters who are looking for recs to work on can submit their application, where we're asking, what have you worked on recently? What would you say your niche is? What do you want to work on? Just trying to get those KPIs from them to make sure that we are matching them with the proper requisition to work on. And once you are matched, you kind of get to let the curtain drop and see, who is the client and what is the rec, and, get to work on it. You're agreeing to submit notes as the rec holder needs to submit them. So during my pitch, I tell my clients, this is how you're going to get your notes
Yeah.
and how we're going to present candidates to you. As a fulfillment recruiter, you're kind of operating as I have pitched to my client and signed them on. And there's, the agreement that the rec will be split once it's fulfilled. So, yeah,
That's it. I,
it's been fun.
I'm trying not to laugh because you made me think of like the curtain being dropped. It's almost like, Love is Blind. It's like the wreck is blind, right? So you get to call the rec board. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know, what am I gonna get, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, and is
He's
it gonna
really
kind of
curious.
work out? And then there's a time after, right? Like the recruiter, the meeting, at the rec altar. It like, is
Yep.
this gonna work, and everything else. So
Yep.
I couldn't help myself.
It's
That
exactly how it
I
is.
blame my wife. She got me on that show, and it's brutal. It was eighth month of pregnancy. Nothing I could say, but the how does one get the most out of the rec board? Maybe starting with the rec holder and then the recruiter.
Yeah, again, like if you are the rec holder, submitting a qualified rec, not just a rec that you've been handed, via email, that you've had no introduction to, that you don't have a good understanding about the company. Like, you need to be able to speak to it and, feel good that it's going to close. And, get the most favorable terms for everyone. Obviously, we want recs that are worth the split. So, not something that's going to be, a $5,000, placement fee, and then we have to split it, 2 weeks, that's not fun for anyone. So, making sure that you're getting good recs, good pay ranges, so that way it's worth everyone's time and
Yeah.
efforts. Um,
No money back guarantees. Yeah.
and from the fulfillment side, being ready to work, being ready to, I'm holding you to my standards of submitting candidates. I'll give you a little bit more time, 5 days, to the rec holder, because again, it's about working quickly on it and making sure that's being worked on. It again, if it's a hard role, that's okay, but having that line of communication open, you are the one that's getting the market research to report back to the rec holder who is client facing. They will own that client relationship, and making sure there's that communication. If you say that you're a Swift Army knife and you can work on anything, like, be a Swiss Army knife and work on anything. Or if you
Yeah.
really only want to work on a sales role, like, that's cool. We have plenty. If you want to work eng, please apply. We have more than we can handle right now. So just, being, as clear as possible as to what you will be successful working on.
For sure. I love it. I love it. I'm excited. I know we're in the beta stage of this right now,
Yeah.
and kind of having the wait list so we can just make sure we're seeing these initial wins. I know that we have like submittals and interviews and hopefully offers going out, and it's only been a couple of weeks,
Yes.
which is pretty exciting. So,
Yes.
I love
Yep.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts, takeaways, pieces of advice for owners, recruiters,
Yeah.
anyone out there?
Yeah. I think this year has been a more challenging year than years prior for agency recruiters, even internal recruiters. They've every side of the coin has been hit pretty hard. But there are so many recs out there still. There's so many clients looking for partnerships. They might not be the client that, you were working with last year, but, really identify the clients that aren't getting hit up by agency recruiters day in and day out. Those uh, companies that just raise money and they're on crunch base, like, maybe those aren't the ones to go after, because everyone's trying to get their money, but going after ones that fly under the radar is a great way to find business right now. There's so much out there. I am never territorial as a recruiter. There's no, I mean, there is a secret sauce, but it's not rocket science. It's not a hidden secret as to how to get business and how to keep business. There's always going to be so many of us out there that I am not nervous or scared. I actually want to help folks have success and win and have as much fun as I do with recruiting. I never in my wildest dreams thought this was going to be my job.
Yeah.
Truly.
I love it. It's a great pep talk. I think a lot of people need to hear that and to see it, and it's true. I mean, I'm amazed at our rec board, at the split rec board, and there's a ton of opportunity out there. So, I mean, if you're a recruiter that's kind of in that position, that's like, I'm down to work hard and learn and be coached and make some money, make some placements, and want to work with a good team, like, reach out to us, reach out to Lauren,
Yes.
on LinkedIn. I know we're relaunching our website over this weekend, so by the time this is out, that will be looking all pretty. And so reach out to us, right? Reach out to Lauren
Yep.
on LinkedIn, shoot us a message. We can get you the forms to apply for the rec board. If your company needing any help hiring, whether an agency owner or anything else, again, reach out to myself or Lauren. Probably just Lauren. She's the one that can handle it. She'll work way faster than I will. She'll probably have candidates to you by the end of the call. So reach out to us. And other than that, Lauren, thank you so much for being on
Thanks.
here, taking the time.
Talk to you later.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this episode, Digital Recruiter Podcast. We will see you next time. Make sure to 5 stars, rate, download, follow, all that good stuff. Help the small guy, little guy podcast. Rise up the charts. Until then, happy hunting.